Imagine lying awake inside a massive stone castle while winter wind howls outside. The walls are thick, the ceilings high, and the air cold enough to make your breath visible. There is no central heating, no insulation, and no glass windows as we know them today. Only stone, darkness, and cold. Medieval castles may appear powerful and protective, but during winter nights they became brutally uncomfortable. Stone absorbs cold throughout the day and releases it slowly after sunset. Once night fell, the chill crept into every corridor, chamber, and tower. Even the strongest walls could not keep the cold out. Inside many castles, temperatures dropped close to those outside. Frost sometimes formed on interior walls. Water could freeze indoors. Sleeping was not about comfort or rest. It was about enduring the night. Fireplaces were the main source of warmth, but they were far from effective. Most heat escaped through wide chimneys or was lost in vast open halls. Only a few rooms could be heated at a time, usually those occupied by the lord or high-ranking nobles. Guards served. To endure the cold, medieval people relied first and foremost on clothing. Warmth was built in layers. Linen was worn closest to the skin, followed by wool, the most important material for insulation. Wool retained heat even when damp and was far more effective than any other fabric available at the time. The wealthy owned heavy cloaks, fur-lined garments, and thick woolen tunics. Fur from animals such as foxes, wolves, or sheep provided crucial protection against freezing temperatures. The poor had fewer layers and thinner clothing, often patched and reused for years. Still, even worn wool was better than nothing. At night, people slept fully clothed. Removing garments would have meant losing precious body heat. Cloaks, hoods, and even boots were kept on while sleeping. Blankets were rare and usually shared. Animal skins were sometimes used as covers, especially in colder regions. Shared sleeping was another essential strategy. Entire households often slept in the same room, sometimes in the same bed. Body heat mattered. Children slept close to parents. Servants slept near each other or close to animals, whose warmth helped keep the air slightly less cold. Beds were positioned carefully. Sleeping too close to outer walls meant exposure to freezing stone. Whenever possible, beds were placed away from windows and walls, sometimes behind curtains or wooden screens to block drafts. Daily routines were shaped by the cold. Physical activity during the day was not only necessary for work, but also for staying warm. Movement generated heat. Remaining still for too long meant losing it. Even food played a role. Hot meals, thick soups, and warm drinks were essential in winter. Spices, when available, were believed to help the body retain warmth. Alcohol, especially ale or wine, was commonly consumed, not for comfort alone, but to create a temporary sense of warmth. Despite these efforts, winter nights remained brutal. Cold crept into joints, weakened the body, and increased the risk of illness. For the elderly, the sick, and the very young, surviving winter inside a castle was never guaranteed. Yet people endured. They learned from experience, passed down knowledge, and adapted their lives around the reality of cold stone and long nights. What kept them alive was not comfort, but discipline, routine, and the understanding that winter would pass, if they survived it. Night inside a medieval castle was never truly quiet. Even in the deepest winter, guards remained on duty, patrolling walls, towers, and gates. Standing still for hours in freezing air was one of the most dangerous tasks. Cold numbed the body, slowed reactions, and could become deadly. To survive, guards constantly moved. They walked their routes again and again, stomped their feet, rubbed their hands, and rotated shifts whenever possible. Remaining motionless meant losing heat too quickly. In extreme cold, even armor became a problem, as metal absorbed cold and pressed it directly against the body. Fire management was another matter of survival. Fires were carefully controlled, not only to save fuel, but to reduce the risk of fire spreading through wooden structures. Large fireplaces were watched closely, while smaller braziers were sometimes moved between rooms during the evening to provide brief warmth before nightfall. In many castles, embers were preserved overnight rather than letting fires die completely. Ashes were piled carefully over glowing coals to keep them alive until morning. This practice could mean the difference between warmth and freezing when the day began. Castle architecture itself reflected the struggle against cold. Heavy doors, narrow passages, and thick walls were designed primarily for defense, but they also limited airflow. Tapestries hung on walls were not just decorative. They provided insulation, trapping a thin layer of warmer air and reducing drafts from stone surfaces. Animals played an unexpected role as well. In some castles, livestock were kept in lower levels or nearby structures. Their body heat helped warm the surrounding air slightly, especially during the coldest nights. The smell and noise were unpleasant, but warmth mattered more than comfort. Cold affected health constantly. Stiff joints, weakened immune systems, and respiratory illnesses were common in winter. Frostbite was a real threat, especially for guards and servants exposed to wind and snow. Healing was slow and medical knowledge limited. Despite all this, life did not stop. Duties continued, meals were prepared, watches were kept. Winter was not an emergency. It was a season that had to be endured year after year. Survival depended on awareness, discipline, and experience. Those who ignored the cold, underestimated it, or failed to prepare often paid the price. And while castles symbolized strength and protection from enemies, the true enemy during winter nights was invisible, silent, and relentless, the cold itself. Winter nights in medieval castles did not affect everyone equally. Those with power and status had access to the warmest rooms, the best clothing, and the most reliable food. Lords and nobles slept closer to fireplaces, wrapped in furs and heavy wool, shielded from the worst of the cold. But servants, guards, and the poor carried the true burden of winter. They slept in drafty corridors, towers, and shared rooms with little protection. Their clothing was thinner, their bedding simpler, and their exposure constant. For them, each cold night was a test of endurance. The most vulnerable were children, the elderly, and the sick. Weak bodies struggled to retain heat. Illness spread more easily in winter, and recovery was slow. Many did not survive until spring. Death during winter was not shocking. It was expected. Yet people adapted. They learned to read the cold, to sense danger before it became fatal. They passed down knowledge through generations, how to layer clothing, how to preserve fire, how to move, sleep, and eat to conserve warmth. Survival became tradition. Castles were symbols of power, but they were never designed for comfort. They protected against human enemies, not nature. Stone walls could stop arrows and swords, but they could not stop winter. And still, people lived there. They worked, slept, guarded, and endured. Not because it was easy, but because it was their world. The cold shaped their routines. their architecture, and their lives. It taught discipline, patience, and resilience. Warmth was never taken for granted. It was earned, protected, and shared. Looking back, it is easy to admire medieval castles as monuments of strength and history. But behind their walls were ordinary people fighting a quiet battle every night against darkness, hunger, and freezing cold. They survived not through comfort, but through endurance. And that may be the greatest lesson winter nights in medieval castles can teach us today.